All right. Now, next on our program, we have an honored and esteemed guest, Dr. John Jackson. He's a highly decorated U.S. Army Airborne Ranger who is currently serving as the Executive Director of Stag Vets Incorporated. Recently, Dr. John received the Georgia State Conservative of the Year Award and the National Conservative of the Year Award as well. One for the state, one for the national. He's strong. Okay, and he has been inducted into the Georgia Conservative Hall of Fame. In his spare time, Dr. John travels the globe to explore diverse seeds and cuisines from the African diaspora and immersing himself in the knowledge of native and indigenous cultures, which he eagerly shares with his community. So he is the right person to talk to us about African foods. You know, he really has done his homework on that. He's also set to appear in the upcoming Netflix docudrama where he travels to Africa to connect with his ancestral roots. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Dr. John Jackson.
All right, guys, I don't have long to talk. I wish I had all day. But yeah, my name is John Jackson, Executive Director of Stag Vets Inc., founder of Comfort Farms. Like you said, I was a United States Army Ranger, spent time in special operations with 6 combat tours. I am a 100% disabled veteran due to my injuries at war. Most of them are invisible. And one of the things is, 9/11 just took place, right? And so I joined the military literally right after 9/11. My home was in Jersey City, looking at the New York skyline. And so when that went down, that's when I actually joined the military. But I'm a kind of unique person, right? My mom, she's a refugee from Africa, right? She came over from Liberia when they had civil war and things like that. And so I grew up with part of my family deeply entrenched in African culture. Then the other part of my family, my dad's from Georgia, he's a kind of a hillbilly. Okay? So these two cultures collided, right? And so that's how I grew up. But as a young kid, I grew up embarrassed by my African heritage. And I say that because Hollywood, television, all these things never depicted Africans in a good light. Okay, it was always, my heroes had to be either a drug dealer or a pimp or some crackhead or something like that. This is what we saw on television. And so I was embarrassed by my mother being African, because that's all they showed. I mean, Tarzan, the white guy who's running around, and everybody else is butt naked saying buck one and all that other kind of stuff. That was my history. And so I kind of ran away from that until my mom snatched me up and said, "Sit down, boy, I'm going to show you who you are, where you're from." Right. Okay? And she did, and it made me feel personal. I love my mother to this day. My grandmother, Olive Thomas, she just died at 96 years old. I wanted to find out who I was. When I joined the military, it was an amazing thing for me, right? So I joined the military. I had to get rid of who I was to be a warfighter. And some things that we do when we go fight war, we have to kind of forget who we were. Then I signed up for this crazy group called the Rangers, the Special Operations. It's like the mob. I joined them, did some insane things, and I had to forget who I was again in order to do that job. But when I got out of the military, I sat back and I said, who am I? Who am I? And I started going back into the history books and started reading about, I wanted to know what my culture was. Western civilization has a way of starting our ancestry or our history at the point of slavery, at the point of colonization. And we have been so, how can I say this, conditioned to believe that we contribute nothing to the world. And I got fed up with that. I said, no, there has to be something more. But as I dig deeper and deeper and deeper into the history, I couldn't find pretty much anything. You go to Google and you find this, or you make a statement on Facebook, and everybody laughs at you and says, you contribute nothing to this world. And so I said, just a novel thought, okay? Just a novel thought. Well, how do I find out about who I am? What is out there that's going to tell me about this? And then I started to think that the only thing that can tell me who I am, where I'm from, and what I'm about is literally our food. Okay? Agriculture is, you don't have a culture without agriculture. Okay? When I started looking at that, I started going back into the seed world, right? I started looking at, hey, you know what, there are things out here that we're not talking about and we're not discussing. We went from, as humans, right, which, you know, in the motherland, we went from hunters and gatherers to domesticating food. What do I mean by that? This. Anybody ever seen this? Everybody know what this is? Rice. All right. Guess what? This is just not rice. This is just not rice. The taxonomic name for the most of the rice that we have out there is called Orosia sativa, right? It's the Asian rice that we have, pretty much that predominates all the world that we have. But there's this other special rice that we don't know about. It's called Orosia glabinerea. This is true African rice. All right? True African rice. Hardly anybody knows about it. When the enslaved came in to around the 1600s to 1700s, especially in South Carolina and in Georgia, they needed to get food from their country back over here in order for them to survive. And then because they were dying by malnutrition. And so what they did was they went back and they got the food that they were growing in their homes. This was the first rice to hit America. The first rice, Orosia glabinerea. There are thousands of varieties. You know why? Because out of 5,000 indigenous tribes around the world, 3,000 of them reside in Africa alone. Out of those 3,000, you have just one tribe has anywhere from 40 to 500 subsets of those tribes. Africa is the most diverse continent, and our people are the most diverse genetically in the world. When you look at one African versus another African, they are genetically different, like apples and oranges. People say, this person looks European, or this person looks Asian. Negative, the Asian looks African. The European looks African. Our features are so distinct across the continent, and all of this has been taken away from us because of the fact of how the Western society wants to downplay the excellence of Africans. But guess what? The seeds don't lie. This food goes back 6,000 years before Jesus Christ. 6,000 years. And so, when you domesticate a food, what happens? You're able to feed your people, you're able to feed your colonies, your armies, you're able to feed and generate income, and do major things. So when we go back 6,000 years ago, that's a much different story than what our history is telling us now. We go back to the time of empires. We go back to a time of regal people, of subsistence. These people who lived 6,000 years before Christ were sustaining. They were thriving. They were in the arts. You can't create if you're just merely surviving. We know this because most of our arts are in European museums. Okay? And those museums show the artwork of our people, the history of our people. But we've been downplayed because certain people saw our excellence. So I was in the military and I saw this guy. I want to make sure I don't go my time with this. So I was in the military and I saw this guy. I worked with him. He was from Liberia, from Sudan. When I get out, I say, hey, Cliff, I need you to send me some food from my mother's land. And Cliff, he's an African soldier. He ain't into no farming or nothing. But he went down, which like my grandmother told me, most of the women are the seed carriers there. And so he went down to the market. He brought me all these things. And so I planted this okra one day, and the okra grew 15 feet. And I'm sitting there looking at this okra, and I'm like, what's going on? And I take a picture of it, and I put it on there. And then immediately, I get this call from Chris Smith. He says, where'd you get that okra? And I'm like, my buddy in Africa. He goes, that is possibly the most rarest okra on the planet. And I said, are you serious? Here it is. I introduced this okra to the United States, our Western world, in 2019, and I named it Motherland Okra. I'm going to tell you the significance of this okra. There were people in Nigeria and Ghana, in the Congo, that saw this okra. This was the okra of their grandparents. And they bought this okra from the United States and introduced it back into their regional foodways. Our food is so important. If we lose the seed, we lose our culture. We're in the position right now where GMOs are all over the country, are taking our seeds and they're getting rid of them. And when you do that, it's cultural genocide. These seeds have the migratory patterns from where we are today back to our ancestral knowledge for where they are. And it is incumbent on us to maintain them. Everything from those boards have traditional, regional, cultural significance. If we lose the seeds, we can never grow them again. It is important for every single person here, those of the diaspora and those who are from Africa, to maintain their cultural heritage seeds. One more. I went to the Amazon. I found a seed saver in the middle of the Amazon. In the middle of the Amazon, when I tell you. These are watermelon seeds. And he was planting watermelon, yams. He was planting all the things of the old plantation. And he gave me these seeds. And I grew these watermelon seeds and found out these watermelon seeds came from 1600s. His family and those have been saving these seeds. In that time around there, Banku Bahu, the Colombian who was Roots, they made the story Roots out of the Mandinka tribe. This guy was so fearless, the Colombians hate him. They gave him his own town if he would stop stealing slaves from the plantations. And so with this, I renamed the seed the Bengo Jungle Jewel. This is our seed. This comes from the Africans of the diaspora who escaped and who fought so hard. And let me tell you, this watermelon tastes like syrup. It is so sweet and delicious. One day I will make this available for everybody. And like I said, I don't have too much time on this, but it's been really great to be here and talk to you guys today. I run a farm called Comfort Farms down in Milledgeville, Georgia. You can look me up. We're doing an African-inspired festival in January called the Pied de Montboucherie, where we're going to deep dive into African foodways from the beginning to end. Even with the having people, we would actually slaughter the animals on the farm with spirituality and with reverence towards African food, and highlight and give voice to our ancestors in a way that pretty much has never been done. So, thank you. I appreciate it. And one thing to remember is that seeds are the only inheritance given to us by our ancestors. Thank you.
Dr. Joshua, I know me being Nigerian, we know a lot of our Nigerian people that are growing their own seeds in the yard. They have leaves.